She's only 9 years old, but she sneaks out of a mafia boss's mansion every single night to meet the one boy her father warned her about. And the night they're finally caught, her father doesn't punish her, he punishes the boy instead. No one in the mansion understands why she keeps going back, not the guards, not the staff, and definitely not her father, because to him, that boy is a mistake that should have never existed. But to her, he's the only place she feels free. The mansion didn't feel like a home. It felt like a museum where the exhibits weren't allowed to move. Diane spent her mornings in a room that smelled of expensive floor wax and old books. At 9 years old, her schedule was a military operation. 7 a.m., breakfast in total silence. 8 a.m., private tutors for Mandarin and French. 10 a.m., violin practice until her fingers felt bruised. Her father, Boss Kang, sat at the head of a mahogany table that felt miles long. He never looked at her. He looked through her, checking his watch, his mind already on the docks, the warehouses, and the men who owed him blood or money. Boss Kang said, "The tutor says your intonation was off yesterday, Diane. Perfection is not a choice in this house. It is the rent you pay for your safety." Diane replied, "Yes, father, I'll practice for another hour." She looked out the window past the 3 layers of bulletproof glass. Down below, in the gravel driveway, the heat was shimmering. That's where the other world lived. In the staff quarters, Malik woke up to the sound of a heavy engine idling. His father, Abi, was already dressed in his crisp black driver's suit, despite the humid morning air. Their room was small, just 2 cots and a single oscillating fan, but it smelled like the spices Abi managed to find in the local market. Abi whispered, "Malik, stay away from the main garden today. Mr. Kang has a meeting. If they see you, they see a distraction. If they see a distraction, I lose my keys." Malik answered, "I know, Baba. I'll stay by the garage." Abi said, "Good. Remember why we are here. We survived the crossing. We survived the city. Let us survive this mansion." Malik watched his father bow low as Boss Kang stepped into the back of the sedan. Malik felt a hot spark of anger in his chest, but he washed it away with a garden hose, spraying down the tires of the cars he wasn't allowed to sit in. From the second floor, Diane watched the water from Malik's hose catch the sunlight, creating tiny fleeting rainbows in the dirt. She pressed her hand against the glass. He looked up just for a second, and their eyes met. It was a silent conversation between 2 prisoners, one in silk and one in denim. In this mansion, the rules were simple. Don't cross the line, don't look the boss in the eye, and above all, never imagine that the person on the other side of the glass is anything like you. The clock in the grand hallway chimed 12 times. In the mansion, midnight didn't mean sleep. It meant a shift change. The heavy iron gates hummed as they closed, and the night guards swapped their positions, their boots crunching on the gravel. Inside her room, Diane didn't turn on the lights. She took 4 heavy pillows and arranged them in a row under her silk duvet. From the doorway, in the dim glow of the security light, it looked like a sleeping child. She held her breath as she slid open the glass door to her balcony. The air was thick and humid, smelling of jasmine and car exhaust. She whispered, 1, 2, 3. She climbed over the stone railing, her small hands gripping the cold ivy vines. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. One slip, and the motion sensors would scream. One cough, and the guards would have their flashlights on her in seconds. She reached the grass, staying low, moving like a shadow toward the old stone pagoda. At the same time, in the stifling heat of the staff quarters, Malik was moving too. He knew the guards' schedules. He knew that at 12:05, the head guard always took a 3-minute break behind the garage. Malik slipped through the gap in the fence and reached the pagoda first. He sat on the stone floor, his back against a pillar, waiting. Then, a rustle of silk. Diane stepped into the moonlight. Malik said, "You're late. I thought the boss locked your windows." Diane replied, "He tried, but he forgets that I live here too. I know which locks are rusty." She sat down across from him, tucking her knees to her chest. They were 2 miles apart in status, but only 2 feet apart in the dirt. Malik asked, "Why do you come out here? You have everything in there. I saw the delivery trucks bringing boxes of toys. Big boxes." Diane said, "They're just things, Malik. Things don't talk back. My father thinks if he fills the house with gold, I won't notice that it's empty." Malik reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, smooth wooden bird. Malik said, "My grandfather made this back home. He said that birds are the only ones who don't recognize borders. They don't need a passport to fly over a wall." Diane asked, "Is it beautiful? Your home?" Malik answered, "It's loud, not quiet like this place. There are markets that smell like ginger and roasted meat. There are kids playing soccer in the street. Here, everyone is afraid to make a sound." Diane reached out and touched the wooden bird. Her fingers brushed Malik's hand. She didn't pull away. She said, Teach me how to be like a bird." Malik replied, "First rule, you have to stop looking at the ground. If you look at the ground, you see the cage. If you look at the stars, you see the way out." They sat there for an hour, whispering about a world beyond the razor wire. But suddenly, a flashlight beam swept across the top of the pagoda. Malik whispered urgently, "Go, now. If they see you with me, they won't just stop us, they'll send me and my father away." Diane stood up, her eyes wide. She looked at the mansion, the giant, glowing monster of stone, and then back at Malik. She asked, "Tomorrow? Same time?" Malik promised, "Every night, until we fly." The secret was no longer a game. It was a ghost that followed them everywhere. In the weeks that followed, the silence of the mansion grew heavier. For Dayin, the days felt like a countdown. Every time a guard looked at her for a second too long, her heart would skip. Every time her father mentioned the security of the household, she felt the walls closing in. She began to notice things she had never seen before, the way the red lights on the cameras pulsed like a heartbeat, and the way the shadows in the garden seemed to stretch toward the staff quarters. Down in the garage, Malik felt the pressure too. His father, Abe, was a man of few words, but he was observant. He noticed the mud on Malik's sneakers that didn't come from the driveway. He noticed how Malik's eyes would drift toward the second-story windows whenever they were outside. Abe said, "Malik, a man in my position doesn't get second chances. We are guests in a house built on power. If you break the silence, you break our lives." Malik looked at the ground and replied, "I'm just breathing, Baba. Is even breathing a crime here?" Abe didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on the steering wheel. That night, the air was thick with a coming storm. The wind groaned through the ivy as Dayin made her way to the pagoda. When she arrived, Malik was already there, but he wasn't sitting down. He was standing in the darkest corner, his eyes fixed on the main path. Dayin whispered, "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a spirit." Malik replied, "The guards. They've doubled the patrol. Guard Choi didn't take his break tonight. I had to crawl through the drainage pipe just to get past the gate." They sat together, but for the first time they didn't talk about the ocean or the wooden bird. They listened. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot. Every rustle of the leaves felt like a hand reaching for them. Suddenly, a sharp white beam of light cut through the trees. It wasn't a sweep, it was steady. Someone was walking directly toward the pagoda. Malik grabbed Dayin's hand. His palm was sweaty, but his grip was iron. He hissed, "Don't move, don't even breathe." They huddled behind the center stone pillar, pressing their bodies into the cold, rough rock. The light grew brighter, turning the edges of the pagoda into silver. They could hear the heavy thud of boots on the grass, the metallic jingle of a utility belt. The guard stopped just 5 feet away. He coughed, the sound echoing in the small stone space.
The beam of his flashlight danced across the ceiling, inches above their heads, illuminating the dust and the spiderwebs. Dae-in squeezed her eyes shut. She prayed to a mother she couldn't remember, asking for the earth to swallow them whole. After what felt like an eternity, the guards spat on the ground and turned away. The light faded, the boots receded. Malik let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He whispered, "He almost had us, Dae-in. He was right there." Dae-in looked at the mansion, glowing like a giant angry coal in the distance. The golden cage wasn't just a metaphor anymore. It was a trap that was slowly snapping shut. She said, "He's going to find out, Malik, my father. He knows when a single leaf falls out of place. How long can we keep doing this?" Malik looked at her, his face pale in the dying moonlight. He answered, "As long as you want to be free. But the wall is getting taller every night."
The bubble finally burst. It wasn't a guard who caught them. It was the silence itself. Boss Kang was a man who lived by the vibration of his house, and he had felt a shift. He knew when his daughter's eyes were too bright, and he knew when his driver's son was too quiet. One humid Tuesday night, as Da-in and Malik sat in the pagoda discussing the wooden bird, the garden floodlights didn't just sweep, they snapped on, all of them at once. The pagoda was suddenly as bright as a surgical theater. From the darkness of the main path, Boss Kang emerged. He wasn't running. He didn't need to. He walked with the slow, terrifying confidence of a man who owned the air they were breathing. Behind him, two guards held Abe by the arms. The driver's head was bowed, his frame trembling. Boss Kang stopped 5 feet from the children. He didn't look at his daughter. His eyes, cold as black glass, were fixed on Malik. Boss Kang said, "You were not meant to be here. Not in this garden, not in this country, and certainly not near my daughter." Malik stood up. He didn't hide. He didn't cower. He stood in front of Da-in, a small shield of denim against a wall of silk and stone. Boss Kang continued, "You think you are her friend. You are a guest of my mercy, boy, and mercy is a finite resource." He turned his gaze to Abe, who looked up with tears in his eyes. Boss Kang said, "Abe, you have been a loyal driver, but a driver who cannot control his own house cannot be trusted with mine. If your son takes one more step into these gardens, you will be on a plane by morning. No references, no savings, just the clothes on your back." Da-in stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Father, please, it was my idea. I'm the one who—" Boss Kang cut her off without looking at her. "Go to your room, Da-in. The staff will be bolting the windows tonight, from the outside." The walk back to the mansion felt like a funeral procession. Malik watched as Da-in was led away by the guards. He looked at his father, whose shoulders seemed to have collapsed under the weight of the threat. There was no more talking, no more stories about the ocean. For the next 2 weeks, the mansion became a tomb. The pagoda sat empty. Da-in watched from her window, seeing Malik only as a distant shape in the driveway, head down, scrubbing the hubcaps of her father's cars. The connection wasn't broken, but it was being starved of light. They were back to being ghosts. The evening air in the servants' quarters was thick and stagnant. Abe sat on the edge of his narrow cot, his driver's cap resting on his knees. He didn't look at Malik. He looked at the floor, his breath hitching in a way that sounded like a sob but was actually exhaustion. "I brought you here for a life, Malik, not a fantasy. Do you know what happens to people like us when we forget our place? We don't just lose a job, we lose the right to exist in this city. You were supposed to be invisible. Why couldn't you just stay invisible?"
I'm sorry, Baba. I didn't mean to. She was just lonely. We were just talking about the birds. I didn't think. That is the problem. You didn't think. You saw a girl, but I see a target. I see a contract. And now, because of your talking, I see a suitcase. In the main house, the office was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Boss Kang sat behind his obsidian desk. He wasn't looking at spreadsheets. He was looking at a wall of monitors. He scrolled back through the archive. Tuesday, 2 in the morning, the pagoda. He saw 2 small silhouettes, his daughter and the driver's son. He scrolled to Wednesday, the garden path. He saw them again. He zoomed in on Diane's face. She was smiling, a real, unfiltered smile he hadn't seen since her mother's funeral. To a man like Kang, that smile was a security breach. It was a vulnerability. It was a variable he couldn't control. He didn't feel joy for her. He felt a cold, sharp spike of territorial rage. The heavy oak doors to Diane's room didn't just open, they hit the wall with a crack. Kang stood in the doorway, the blue light of the hallway silhouetting his frame. Diane jumped from her bed, her book falling to the floor. You have been treating my garden like a playground for a stray. Did you think I was blind, or did you just think I was weak? Father, please, it's not what you think. Malik is the son of a man I pay to drive. He is a ghost that was allowed to haunt my halls because I felt a moment of pity. But pity is a luxury I can no longer afford. They are leaving tonight. Abe is being paid off, and they will be on a transport by dawn. Do not speak. Do not cry. You have brought this on them with your own hands. He turned and left, the click of the lock from the outside sounding like a gunshot. Diane fell to her knees, her forehead against the cold wood of the door, listening to the distant sound of Abe's quarters being cleared out. The golden cage had just become a prison. The storm that had been brewing for weeks finally broke. It wasn't just rain, it was a deluge that turned the mansion's manicured gardens into a blurred sea of gray and silver. In her room, Diane stood at the window. The staff had bolted the glass from the outside, but they couldn't bolt her eyes. Down in the driveway, she saw the black sedan idling. The trunk was open. 2 small, battered suitcases sat on the gravel, getting soaked. Her father had kept his word. Abe and Malik were being sent away. They think I am a piece of the furniture. They think if they move the chair, the room stays the same. But I am not the furniture. I am the house, and today the house falls. She didn't use the music stand this time. She used her own weight. She threw herself against the bolted window frame, her shoulders screaming in pain until the wood splintered and the glass shattered outward. She didn't wait for the guards to react. She climbed out onto the ledge, her white silk dress turning gray in the rain, and she dropped. A 10-foot fall into the mud. She didn't cry. She stood up, her knees scraped and bleeding, and she began to walk. Not toward her father, toward the car. The guards froze. Their rifles were raised, but who do you shoot when the daughter of the house is walking into the line of fire? Boss Kang stepped out of the garage, his umbrella held by a silent subordinate. He watched his daughter, drenched and trembling, walk past him as if he were a ghost. She reached Malik. She didn't say a word. She simply took his hand, her small, pale hand inside his dark, calloused one. If they go, I go. You can't bolt the sky, Father, and you can't own me if there is nothing left of me to own. She began to walk toward the main gate, pulling Malik with her. Abe followed, his eyes wide with terror, looking between the boss and the children. They were 20 feet from the gate, 30. The guards looked at Kang, waiting for the signal to stop them, to end the rebellion. Boss Kang watched them. He saw the way Diane didn't look back. He saw the way she gripped Malik's hand, not with romance, but with the desperate strength of a survivor holding on to a life raft. He realized in that moment that he could stop them. He could lock her in a deeper cell, but he would be ruling over a corpse. The daughter he loved would be gone, replaced by a shell that hated him. The pain on his face was the only thing the rain couldn't wash away. Stop. The children froze. Malik braced himself for the guard's hands on his shoulders, but the hands never came. Kang walked toward them, his boots splashing in the puddles. He stopped 3 feet away. He looked at their joined hands. Abe, take the bags out of the car. You stay. He looked at Diane. He reached out to touch her wet hair, but she flinched just a fraction of an inch. It was the loudest sound in the world. He pulled his hand back, his face a mask of grief. Go inside, Diane. Dry your clothes. The boy stays in the quarters, but the pagoda stays down. No more secrets. If you want to see the world, you will see it through these gates. Together. He turned his back on them, walking into the vast, empty mansion alone. The golden cage hadn't disappeared, but for the first time the bars were made of choice, not steel. Diane and Malik stood in the rain, their hands still joined. They weren't free, but they were no longer divided.
Where souls meet stories. Subscribe and be a part of our story family.